Harlem and Emery Giles welcomed their baby boy in 2004. They named the child Emery Jr. The couple is content even though they don't have a lot of money.
You know, I'm just one cheeseburger away from being a fat.
When Emery finally gets a promotion at work, he promises that they'll start to have better things in life. One day, Harlem's mother, Ms. Woods, comes over to see her grandson. While Ms. Woods babysits, Emery decides to donate Harlem's clothes to Goodwill because the baby made her back bigger. The two head out and make a quick stop at Harlem's dream house. An agent named Miss Ford welcomes them and greets Emery flirtatiously. Harlem is annoyed by the way Miss Ford is talking to her husband. When they finally see the place, Harlem can't help but marvel at the beauty of the place.
I would every single room.
Knowing they can't ever afford it, she asks Emery to just do bedroom Pilates while they pretend it's their home. However, they have to stop because Emery has to answer a phone call. He's never done that before, so Harlem just becomes more suspicious. It doesn't help that she catches Miss Ford and Emery talking outside. When she finally confronts Emery, he hands her the key to the house and reveals he has bought the place already. Harlem is overjoyed. Now the Giles family has everything they could ever ask for. A few days later, Harlem's sister tries to flirt with Emery, but he shuts it down real quick and makes her leave. That man extra Foine for that. When Harlem sees him, she can't help but hop on his D. And y'all, this scene was too spicy to show. After, the family heads out to buy medicine for the baby. While at the parking lot, a thug shoots and kills Emery point blank. Harlem and the baby are unharmed, but it's already too late by the time the authorities arrive. After the death of her loving husband, Harlem remains inconsolable. She grieves so much and doesn't have the energy to look after her son. They move back in with her mother, and Miss Woods steps in to care for baby Emery. And just like that, time passes by. On the baby's first birthday, Miss Woods exerts the effort to throw a small party. One of the guests is Harlem's friend, Lolo. Lolo is now an owner of a hair salon, and she wants Harlem to come over so she can do her hair because she really let herself go. A few days later, Harlem meets up again with Miss Ford to sell the house. She gets $400,000 for it and immediately puts it in the bank. While outside, she catches the attention of a stranger, Scott. The man is with his girlfriend but doesn't shy away from flirting with Harlem. Y'all remember Wednesday Addams? This is her now. After that, Harlem goes to Lolo's salon, where she sees Scott again. Lolo reveals that Scott sells drugs, so everyone knows him. While Scott's girlfriend is getting her hair done, he approaches Harlem and flirts with her. But this time, he takes it up a notch and hands her some money. By the beginning of 2005, Harlem is doing much better and has stopped eating cheeseburgers. She makes a new friend, Jamel, the makeup artist in Lolo's salon. Whenever they go clubbing, Harlem leaves her son to her mother. A few days later, Lolo and Jamel takes Harlem to another club.
I thought Lolo ass gay. You mean to tell me she be niggas and bitches?
Then a man approaches and flirts with Harlem. He tries to play it nice until she rejects his advances. That's when he gets angry and mean. Luckily, Scott sees what's happening and tells the man to leave Harlem. The encounter gives Scott the opportunity to confess his feelings. He spends the rest of the night with Harlem and her friends. He even offers to pay for everything, saying that Harlem will never have to pay for anything when he's around. Suddenly, there's a commotion and gunshots echo inside the club. The group quickly leave the building, and Scott offers to take Harlem home. He doesn't enter the house, knowing that Harlem isn't going to get on her knees just yet, but he promises to call her again. On some days, Harlem takes over the salon when Lolo's not around.
Where's she at? Where's my deposit? Where's my deposit? Where's my deposit?
I would have slapped that hoe. It's not very difficult for Scott to find out where she is. Soon enough, Scott introduces Harlem to his mother and his friends. She knows it's getting serious because she's been introduced to his inner circle. But she has yet to meet Thing. That night, Harlem reveals how Emery was killed. She was devastated because he really was a good man. So Scott assures Harlem he'll keep her safe and asks her to come home with him. Harlem agrees, and for the first time since Emery died, she gives her anus to another man. Afterward, she reveals that she already has a kid. Scott doesn't mind. He even promises to buy her a new house and look after her and her son. Ms. Woods tries to talk Harlem out of moving in with Scott. She knows it's all too fast. But Harlem is blinded by her feelings and Scott's big wallet. One early morning, Scott comes over to pick Harlem up. Ms. Woods confronts him right away, knowing that he's up to no good. Scott lies about having a profession, but Ms. Woods catches him lying because the company he mentions is the one where she works at, and she's never seen him there. She tells Scott to break up with Harlem as soon as possible, but Scott refuses. By 2006, the change in Scott's attitude is undeniable. One time, he picks up Harlem and sees all the shopping bags she has. He also gets to meet Harlem's cousin, Johnny. But despite the proper introductions, Scott thinks that Johnny is giving Harlem back shots and that he took Harlem out for shopping. The argument escalates and he hits Harlem for the first time while calling her names. Scott reminds her that he's not a good guy like Emery and that Harlem should behave herself in his presence. Toss this Temu Snoop Dogg out this. During one party, Jamel notices the bruises on Harlem's body, but Harlem lies about how she got those. Scott plays cards with his friends and gets jealous real quick when Harlem serves a plate for his friend. Harlem tries to pacify him by giving it to him instead, but Scott gets offended, throws the food at Harlem, and grabs her hard by the neck.
Better use lowercase letters when you talking to me.
Embarrassed, Harlem walks away. But just a few minutes later, Scott follows her to the toilet, asking for her goods. When Harlem refuses, he forces himself on her. The next day at the salon,
for somebody with all that new bling, you sure don't seem happy, Miss Thing.
Scott's ex-girlfriend knows that Harlem is being beaten by Scott. She has experienced the same thing, so she warns Harlem that it's only going to get worse. But Harlem refuses to listen. That day, Scott surprises her with a new car. And just like that, she forgives him. A year later, and they're still together. One time, Harlem comes home and sees her son at the table. In front of the boy are the drugs Scott sells. But what's even more criminal is the boy rocks the same ugly braids Scott has. Harlem finally reaches her limit and tells Scott she's leaving him. Meanwhile, the homeboy in the red shirt is doing the absolute most.
I'm watching the little nigga, he good.
It's obvious you don't give a about me, but what you not gonna do is put my motherfucking child's life in danger.
She hides in the bedroom and threatens to call the police if Scott tries to open the door. Then Harlem gathers their things and carries her son downstairs. But Scott has been waiting, and he knocks her unconscious. He wakes her up later and warns her that no one else can have her but him. So, Harlem is forced to stay with Scott and finds out she's pregnant a month later. When he leaves for a business affair, Harlem takes the chance to leave the house for good. So Harlem moves back in with her mother and officially ends her relationship with Scott. 7 months later, and she throws a baby shower at her mother's place. Ms. Woods has invited a lot of people to come over, including Scott. She even defends Scott and insists that he's changed. She thinks he deserves a second chance to be with his family.
He's a tortured man.
But Harlem refuses to believe even if Scott swears he's a better man. He also promises to kill himself if he can't be part of his daughter's life. Please do. To make Harlem happy, Scott reveals he has a huge present for her. Tempted, Harlem agrees to go with him, and she's shocked to see Emery's killer in an abandoned house. Scott found the guy for Harlem to kill, but she can't do it herself. So Scott shoots the man dead as a gift for Harlem. After that, the two are back together again. Lord, This has created a rift between Harlem and her friends. One day, Lolo reveals that Jamel is really sick and will soon die. She wasn't able to tell Harlem because it's been so long since she visited them at the salon. Lolo is hurt that Harlem has a lot of money in the bank, and yet she doesn't help any of them financially. On top of that, Lolo thinks Harlem is stupid for getting back with Scott. Later that day, Harlem visits Jamel and learns that he has AIDS. Not the flesh sores on his face. He only has 1 week to live, and his dying wish is for Harlem to leave Scott for good. When the Foine doctor visits, Jamel starts to flirt with him, and Harlem says that's why he got AIDS. Worried about her friend, Harlem decides to stay until past the visiting hours. She calls Scott and tells him she'll be home late. Then she calls Miss Woods afterward. The old woman reveals that Harlem's cousin Shayna picked up a nice dress from her closet. Harlem has a gut feeling that something is happening behind her back. So she goes over to Scott's place later that night and catches him with Shayna. Lolo is also there with her boyfriend, so Harlem feels a little betrayed. She beats up her own cousin and kicks them all out of the house. When Scott finally comes down from the high, he tries calling Harlem, but she's no longer answering. This time, she breaks up with him for good. She moves to Atlanta and opens up a new business. She's also in the process of purchasing a new house. Miss Woods continues to look after the kids, and Harlem just visits occasionally.
Hey, pumpkin. You okay? Period.
Mother of the Year. One time, she tells her mother that they will all move to Atlanta for a new beginning. Ms. Woods agrees to move. However, she's a bit worried because Scott is still calling her. This is despite the restraining order that Harlem filed against him. Unfortunately, Scott has already found out about their plan, and he's been making Lolo straight by folding her like a pretzel. Lolo also shares that Harlem is all set to start a new life using the money that Emery left her. Scott laughs and reveals he and Emery used to work together. And when Emery said he wanted out, he ordered Emery to get killed. Scott visits Shayna, expecting that Harlem will be at the house. It turns out Shayna just wants to spend some time with him. She tells Scott to forget about Harlem because she can give him the family he wants. In fact, she's pregnant with his child. Furious, Scott snaps and beats up Shayna. He doesn't want her, nor the child she's carrying. Double homicide. Miss Woods throws one last party before they leave for Atlanta. Scott has been invited, so he comes over. Why do they keep inviting this man? He has a letter for his baby daughter, True. He expects to be going with the whole family. He's so happy when he sees Emery and gives him a tight hug. Lolo also shows up at the house because she's worried about Shayna. She hasn't heard from her for days, and she wants Harlem to do a welfare check. But Harlem wants nothing to do with her cousin. Scott is more than excited for the move, but Harlem reveals that he's not joining them. She just wants to talk about custody matters. Scott gets angry, thinking about being far from his daughter. He can't handle the fact that Harlem doesn't want him anymore. A few moments later, he returns and shoots Emery dead. Y'all going to hell for recommending this to me. Harlem begs for her life, but Scott kills her too. Then he chases Lolo and shoots her as well. Miss Woods is horrified when she sees the dead bodies in the house. True is unharmed beside her mother. Miss Woods then takes Harlem's gun and runs after Scott, but Scott ends his own life before she can do anything. True is left all alone in the house. Scott's letter to her was a warning that if he can't have Harlem, then no one else can. This is unfortunately a sad reality that many women face. But Lord, I wanted to punch everyone in this movie for not thinking about the children's safety. What did you guys think of this one?
If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. So, if you like to watch more foolishness, you can click here or here.